Well, some of Canada's biggest school boards have recently launched lawsuits against the companies behind Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. They claim social media is causing inattention. Oh, shoot, where was I? They claim social media is causing inattention, a learning, and mental health. Okay, just a second here. Okay, they claim social media is causing a mental health crisis. You get the idea. If you have a phone and you use social media, you know it can be distracting. So imagine if you were a teacher with a classroom full of kids who were all eager to get back to their phones as soon as the bell rings. Well, today we are joined by Saskatchewan teachers and students who can tell us what's happening in our classrooms here. We'll dig into what makes social media so addictive, and we want to hear from you. What conversations are you having with your kids or students around phone use? Give us a call, 1-800-661-716-2221. That's 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, we have a great conversation lined up for you today with people who think about this topic every single day. Matthew Johnson is the Director of Education for Media Smarts. He's joining us via Google Meets. Welcome to Blue Sky, Matthew.
Thank you.
And in our Regina studio, we have three guests right now. Sarah Maria Dobis is Vice Principal and teaches grades 7 to 12 in Regina. Hi, Sarah Maria.
Hi there.
And Ala Ali Ibrahim is a grade 12 Regina Huda School student. Hi, Ala.
Hi.
And Aaron Whitfield is a grade 7 student in Regina as well. Hi, Aaron.
Hello there.
Thanks to all of you so much for being here. I do want to start with Matthew right now, though. I want to start with just setting up this lawsuit. This is the first one of its kind in Canada, but similar to things that we've been seeing in the U.S. So, Matthew, what are the school boards saying is happening to their students as a result of social media use?
Well, the argument appears to be, and I'm not a legal expert by any means, but the argument appears to be that the design of these apps has led to challenges relating to mental health and to the ability of young people to have sustained attention that is making it difficult for teachers to do their jobs and for students to have the education that they need. So they're essentially saying that the design of these apps is having harm or doing harm to the educational experience.
Now, Media Smarts has done research about how young people use screen time and how it affects them. So what do we know?
Well, what we do know is that a significant number of young people are concerned about the amount of time that they spend online. But we also know that that concern is not related to how they actually behave. So young people who are concerned don't necessarily spend any less time online than those who aren't concerned. We also know that most of the negative effects that we found were connected to screen time occur at the high end, so generally at 3 hours or more of screen time per day, and are more likely to be connected to weekday rather than weekend screen time. So it does seem like in most cases, screen time, as opposed to how young people are using screens and their attitudes towards their screen use, really only becomes a factor at very high levels and is primarily a factor at times when it's displacing things that can't be made up, like sleep. So obviously, when kids are using screens for long periods of time on weekdays, they can't make up the lost sleep the next day. They have to get to school. Whereas on weekends, they do have that ability to make up lost sleep.
Tell me more a bit about the impact of social media on youth.
Well, that's a very contentious subject. When we talk specifically about social media, screens in general, a lot of researchers have found some impact. One of the challenging things, of course, is most of these studies are correlational. So we look at time spent or either using screens in general or using social media, or in some cases, even doing particular activities on social media, and look at how it correlates to things like either self-reported mental health, or in some cases, things like emergency room visits for mental health and so on. And what happens is you do get differing results. Sometimes you will get a result in a particular population, but not another population. Sometimes you will get a result that is very small. So one researcher found, for instance, found associations that were pretty similar to the associations with how many potatoes people ate in a year. Um, but we do know that there can be impacts of particular kinds of social network use on individuals. It's harder to study at large scales. It's harder to say definitively what's happening at a population level. But there's a lot of evidence, first of all, to suggest that uh, passive rather than active social media use um, has a negative effect on well-being. So if you're just using it to scroll and to surf rather than using it to connect with other people, there's also a lot of evidence that when social media use makes us compare ourselves to other people, it has a negative effect on our well-being, on things like body image. And interestingly, there's a lot of recent research that suggests that we are more likely to have a negative experience and negative effects from social media if we see ourselves as being addicted to it, as opposed to it being a habit that we can change and influence.
Really interesting. I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. That was Matthew Johnson. He's the Director of Education for Media Smarts. And if you have questions for Matthew or you'd like to get on the show and give us a call, that would be great. We'd love to hear from you. Our number is 1-800-716-2221. You can also send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. I want to bring in our students now. Ala, how long have you had a phone for?
I've had a phone for around maybe 6 years now.
Okay, and what made you decide to get one in the first place?
Oh, usually it's like friends around you. You like see other people have phones and you're young and you're like, oh, I want one too. They're doing a bunch of cool stuff on it.
That's fair. That's fair. Aaron, what about you? How long have you had a phone for?
I'd say this is my third year having a phone.
And why did you want one?
Same reason, probably just because everyone around me had one and everyone else just seemed so cool and I didn't have a phone, so I was just begging Mom to get me a phone.
I was in the same boat as you, Aaron, when I was in high school. Everyone else had phones and I didn't, so I totally understand that it just seems like something that everyone has and you just need one too. Aaron, what do you use your phone for?
Well, I hope to use it for connections socially mostly. Like I use social media a lot. I try to talk to my friends a lot, but then when I get bored, I obviously scroll a whole bunch for X amount of time.
Yeah, Ala, do you have a tendency to scroll too?
I do, but I usually use like other stuff around me to kind of distract me from it because I do eventually get bored.
Would you say that either of you are at the level where you'd say that you are addicted to your phone, Ala?
I would not say I am just because I like reading a ton, so I kind of use that as a distraction from going on my phone.
Do you use it consciously though? Do you make an effort not to get addicted? Would you say?
I feel as though I do because I don't know. I don't feel as though staring at a screen for so long benefits me in any way. But yeah, so I kind of just go to books to kind of lean away from it.
Aaron, what about you? Would you say that you're addicted to your phone?
Unfortunately, I do feel like I am getting to that point. I am conscious of it. I try to stop myself, but it's not an easy thing to do. And I do get bored as well, but it's just like constant gravitational pull towards it. And I just don't like feeling that, but it's the way it is, I guess.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that you try to avoid it?
Well, I am conscious of it, but when I finally realize that I've done way more than I should have, I go and just play soccer or do something, go upstairs, talk with my mom, make food or something. I don't know. It's just anything to get me away from my phone.
Have you ever even, given it to someone and said, hold on to this for me for now? I'm getting too attached to it.
Yes, I have. I've given it to my mom, asking her to take it away from me and hide it, but I know where she's going to put it, and I always find my way back to it.
Sarah Maria, I want to bring you into the conversation. You teach grades 7 to 12. You're a vice principal at a Regina school. What were you thinking when you were hearing about this court case?
It's interesting. I mean, it's understandable that, like, what they say is true. Like, the impact that social media has had on kids, the impact on their attention span, definitely I've observed that. I had never considered suing
a lawsuit
towards social media. It's definitely been something I've managed and talked to parents about managing, but I'd never thought about that.
I want to talk more about the impact on students. So how do you see phone use and social media affecting your students on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. Well, I've been teaching for 22 years, and so I've seen the basic phones and then smartphones arrive, and they've been something I've had to help my students manage for probably 7-8 years, and it's been just getting more and more something to manage. We, for our grade 7, 8s, we take them away in the morning and they get them back at the end of the day. So it's really just something to talk to their parents on the bus if they need to. Our grades 9 through 11, we take them away at the start of class, or we have them put them on the front desk at the start of class. And then if we need to use them for a specific app or to look something up, they're allowed to take them and use them in class. And then our grade 12s have more freedom. But it's definitely what I've observed is as soon as there's 2 minutes where there's not an activity, if they're waiting for somebody else to finish their work, or if I'm trying to figure out putting something on a screen, like Aaron was saying, I get bored, so I need to have it. When in the past, students used to be okay, there's 2 minutes to wait. Can we talk? Can we chat? And that was fine. But now it's can I have my phone to go on my phone for these 2 minutes? Or with my grade 12s, because they have access right away, it's phones are out. Or even if they find a group discussion boring, I see them reaching for their phones. So, and it's definitely something we have to help them not just manage using it all the time, but also explicitly thinking about what they're doing.
Well, how do you enforce this though? They're small. It's easy enough to hide your phone. So how do you enforce all of this?
Well, all the teachers in our school are meant to use what I've described, taking it away at the start of class. Often students will be I forgot it in my locker. And so we're probably wasting five minutes at the start of each class being okay, go to your locker and get it. And often they go in the hall, put it in their pocket, and then come back in. So we're using probably 5 minutes at the start of each class to manage it, but we're saving time later with avoiding an argument when we spot a kid that has hidden it. What I'll often do at the start, at some point in class, when we need to look something up, I'll be okay, somebody who's hidden their phone in their pocket, please take out your phone and look this up.
Wow.
And they will, or they'll point towards the classmate that has done it. I'll get that student to look it up and then, have them give me their phone.
I'm sure you have a really interesting perspective because you've been teaching so long. Do you think kids have changed, over the course of your career at that point when cell phones, social media became more and more prominent? Are kids worse off now? Is their mental health worse off?
I would say yes. I mean, I've only been in administration for a few years, but I do know that previously conflicts started and ended at school. But now at least a quarter of the conflicts that I'm dealing with as vice principal have a direct or indirect link to social media, either name calling on social media and then they get in an argument or a fight at school, or lots of cyberbullying and then the kids really feeling depressed at school, feel like they have no friends because they're not on social media. Definitely, yeah, a lot of dealing with conflicts or negative feelings towards oneself or towards others linked to social media.
I'm Candice Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Today, we're talking about the impacts of social media on young people and learning, and we'd love to hear from you also. How has social media impacted a young person in your life? Do you think that there needs to be more regulation? Get in touch. Give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or you can send us an email at bluesky@cbc.ca. I want to talk a little bit more about parents. Matthew, what role do phones play for parents? Do you want to be able to know where people, often people want to know where their kids are all the time. Do you think that that's a good thing?
I think it's a complicated thing. So what our research actually found was that about 2/3 of young Canadians say they got their first smartphone not because they asked for it, but because their parents gave it to them, specifically to be able to keep in touch with them. So there is very much a sense among parents that they expect to be able to know where their kids are at any time, to be able to be in touch with their kids at any time. And, certainly sometimes there are perfectly valid safety reasons for that. And sometimes there are logistical reasons for that if kids are in a lot of activities. But I think parents maybe don't realize the extent to which phones are coming from them. They may not realize how relatively infrequent it is that kids are asking for that first phone. And that as a result, it's not necessarily true that every kid is asking for phones. And it is to a larger extent than parents realize their decision. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing decision. So there are other options available. If you want kids to have a phone so that you can keep in touch with them, but you don't want them to have a smartphone, there are, phones that only do calls and texting. There are also there's the option of letting kids have phones at particular times. So they might have a phone when they're going somewhere on their own. When they need to be able to contact you to get picked up or if plans change, but they don't necessarily need to have a phone during the school day. So I do think parents need to give their kids a little bit more independence, a little bit perhaps more privacy, and think about whether or not they really do need to give their child a phone when they're considering it, and whether their child is ready for that phone, whether they're ready for all of the pressures, all of the distraction, and all of the different things that come with getting a new phone that we've already heard about earlier this hour.
What about modeling good behavior? Is that something that parents should be thinking about themselves, not, scrolling in the presence of their children for hours and hours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a member of the Canadian Pediatric Society's Digital Health Task Force. And so a few years ago, we developed what's called the 4M model of encouraging healthy screen use. And one of those M's, the one that I try to stress as much as possible, is the idea of modeling positive screen use and positive use of digital devices. Because as adults in kids' lives, but particularly as parents, what we do sends a stronger signal than anything that we say. And we can do that even when we are making exceptions. So we do recommend, for instance, that when parents set rules around the use of digital devices, like saying, don't use them at the dinner table, which is one of the ones we recommend, that as much as possible, we parents follow those same rules to show that we really do value them. These aren't just arbitrary rules, and they're not just rules that we're applying to our kids. These are rules for healthy use. And then if you do have to make an exception, explain why you're doing it. Explain, I am going to do this. Excuse me, I need to use my phone. I'm going to do this for this reason. And that's actually a really good practice. Anytime someone is trying to change their phone habits in the early stages, saying out loud what you are going to do and when you will be done is a great way of avoiding getting caught in the phone loop that so many of us are prey to, because it's so easy. And it's happened to me. You go to check the weather, and before you know it, you're on
Yeah.
Instagram or Twitter or whatever. So saying, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'll know when I'm done.
Really interesting. We'll go back to the conversation in just a moment, but I'm Candace Lipsky. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Today, we're talking about the impacts of social media on young people, on their learning. We have the Director of Education for Media Smart. We have a Vice Principal with us. We have 2 Regina students here as well. And we do want to hear from you. Do you think there should be more regulation around social media? How has social media impacted a young person in your life? We want you to join the conversation. Give us a shout, 1-800-716-2221. And you can also send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. I do want to talk about the social aspect of phones. Social media is called social media for a reason. So, Alla, do you feel like you would be as connected to your friends if you didn't have social media?
I honestly don't think so because I'd have to go out and actually meet with them to be able to socialize with them. So I feel like social media kind of makes it easier to contact and ask whenever you need them. They're just kind of there, but just kind of click away.
Do you think you would miss out on things like events or being invited places?
Oh, I feel like that leans more on your friends but as long as you have close friends with you, I don't feel like you'll miss out on as much because they want you being there. But social media definitely does make it easier to make plans and have outings with your friends.
Aaron, what about you? Do you think that you'd be less connected to your friends if you didn't have social media?
I would say no, just because I've met most of my friends at school, and then through school, before we had social media, we used to play video games a lot together, and now we all have microphones, and we all talk together through the video game. That's what I was doing most of last night. And I have this one friend from Ontario that he doesn't have a phone, he doesn't have anything, but we're always just in an Xbox party talking to each other. So I think, no, I don't think that would affect me if I lost social media. I could easily find my friends through the game.
Aaron, you're just 13. You're one of the youngest people that we've had on this show. I am wondering, we were talking about the mental health impacts of social media earlier on. Have you ever come across something on social media that you didn't want to see that really stuck with you, and how did you deal with it?
I have seen stuff that I didn't want to see. I saw the video of the guy burning himself in front of the Israel embassy. That was pretty dark to see, and I can't unsee it. It was just not nice. And there's just so many different things similar to that I haven't come across yet, and I don't want to come across. And anybody could see it, and anybody could take it in different ways, and it all has different effects on people.
How does it affect you?
It's eye-opening, really. I can see what's going on in the world, but I also see what some people are going through, and I can see the goriness and harsh reality of the world sometimes, and it hasn't really affected me that bad, but it's just not something that I can unsee, and it's not I don't know how to explain it. It's just not very
healthy.
Yeah. There you go.
Have you ever experienced, bullying? Maybe not necessarily yourself, but is that something that you see happening to yourself or your friends?
Not to my friends. I've seen my friends get into arguments in comments or replies or something like that, but I've never actually had somebody start something serious on social media. I've seen petty little arguments, but it's just hot-headed people, and everything's easier behind a screen. That's what all the teachers say.
Yeah. Alla, what about you? How do you find that social media impacts your own mental health?
It's kind of similar. You do see a bunch of different stuff that you don't want to see at all, but it's there and you've seen it, and it's kind of the way you take it. I feel like I take stuff like that pretty well because I tend to avoid, because For You page gives you stuff that hopefully you'd want to see. But seeing stuff like that does become harmful, especially if you see comment sections. People always read the comment section when they see videos, and they're just there bad comments and good comments, and some are pretty bad, and you kind of just need to like think to yourself like, no, that's not going to be me. This is not good at all, and just continue if you want to continue scrolling, I guess.
Are you having conversations with your friends at school, Ala, about social media, about limiting it? Is this something that people are talking about?
Honestly, not necessarily. They do use their phones a lot, and I don't think most of them are aware of how long they're on their phones for. So we don't really talk much about social media and the impacts on it. And like with our teachers, yeah, if they do ask, but with one another personally, not really, just because I don't think we recognize that, and I don't think we tell each other, like talk about it with each other, like show just how long you've been on there.
Yeah. Sarah Maria, you mentioned earlier on that you do think that you've seen a change in young people. And I am wondering, we've talked about mental health, and one piece of that is self-esteem. Of course, one of the critiques of social media is that, the impact that it can have on especially young women. You know, we see all these filters. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have I'm lucky in that one of the classes I teach is wellness. So I've had that conversation with my students, just the effect on body image and the effect on, self-image. And Ala was saying, like, we don't really talk about it unless a teacher makes us. Last year, I started a conversation what I thought would be a 5-minute icebreaker, and they talked about it for 75 minutes.
Wow.
Just the impact that it has on them and how they feel bad, and like talking about fat shaming and talking about also like just the irony of the comment sections, and it's just something that all of the class had felt that they both, like all the genders in the class, felt impacted by comments they had seen online, videos they had seen online. Even if like it had nothing to do with them, they thought, like, what if I put a picture up and then people call me like skinny or fat or ugly or whatever.
Was that surprising to you that they all were feeling the same way?
Not really. I mean, like when I was young, it like you were feeling bad about what you saw in a magazine. When you're young, you feel insecure. You feel compared to others. You compare yourself to others. So I think that's natural for that stage. But the fact that and I mean, in magazines, it's not real either. But what you see online, you're seeing like sorry, I don't know the English word. Sorry. What you see is like real people, but with filters.
Right.
So it like could be somebody you know, and you're like, you compare yourself. Oh, they did their makeup really well or whatever. But you're like comparing yourself to everybody.
Yeah. How do you fight that as a teacher, as an adult that these kids trust? How do you fight this?
Conversations, explicit conversations. Like we have our guidance counselor come in and talk about body image, but also like talking about different dangers on the internet, different dangers with phone, but also so explicit conversations like that, like talking about what are you going to be seeing online and how do you react to that? How do you manage that? But also just not even just dealing with simply social media, but in their own life, what's important? Who should you compare yourself to? Like yourself. Talking about being okay with being different. Conversations that we should be having with them, but are even more pressing because of social media.
We've been talking a lot about the negatives of social media, but Sarah Maria, are there any? Do you see positives here? Do you see the opportunity for positives?
For sure, like what Ala and Aaron were saying, being able to get in touch with your friends, being able to see events that happen, but as Ala was saying, like if you have friends, they're going to contact you anyways. They're going to make sure you're there. I think. Sorry, that's the end of my thought.
No, that's totally fine. And Matthew, I want to bring you into the conversation, Director of Education for Media Smarts, Matthew Johnson. Matthew, do you see the potential for positive here with social media use as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say that a lot of the studies that have been done around the world have found a lot of positive effects of social media use. Um, and in many cases, the whether or not it's negative or positive depends on what we're doing with it and our attitude towards it and our habits. So I think that certainly a lot of people do use it to keep in touch in the same way that, we used to use telephones. But it is a lot more convenient. It's a lot easier to have a group conversation. It's easier to make plans. So we know that coming out of the pandemic, it really was a lifeline for people. And we do know that the young people who are most likely to be vulnerable to negative effects, so kids who are marginalized, in vulnerable in one way or another, are also typically the people who are likely to get the most out of social media because it allows them to find resources, it allows them to find a community, it allows them to find people like them. And so that's why it's so important that we teach digital media literacy in the home and in the classroom. In the same way that we don't just give kids the keys to the car and say, go nuts. We have driver education. And it's exactly the same thing with media of all kinds, but particularly social media. We need to be teaching kids, we need to teach them how to manage the conflicts that can turn into bullying and how to deal with the aspects of digital media that make it easy to misunderstand other people or make it harder to feel empathy towards them. We need to teach people to make good ethical decisions about other people's privacy. We need to teach people to be ethical and responsible in sharing information. We need to teach them how to manage their use so that they are making conscious use and developing good habits rather than letting the design of the apps, which often are designed to get us to use them more and more often, rather than letting the design be in the driver's seat.
Do you think that this education is happening enough?
Well, it's something we're advocating for all the time. We're a national organization, a national education organization. That's our mission. And so we're always working to develop new resources that parents and teachers can use. And those are all on our website, mediasmarts.ca, or in French, habilomedia.ca. We're doing research, some of the research that I referred to earlier, to find out what is going on. And we also, whenever we can, work with provincial, territorial, and federal governments to make sure that digital media literacy is well represented in the curriculum. And that it is part of the national conversation so that adults as well are learning these skills. Because, of course, none of us grew up in this world either. And as kids will tell you, adults are just as likely to share misinformation and just as likely to have bad habits when it comes to their media use as kids.
Yeah. I'm Candace Lipsky. I'm filling in for Alicia Grabinski, and you are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. That's 94.1 FM in Saskatoon, 102.5 FM in Regina, and 540 AM across the province. Today, we have with us Matthew Johnson. He's the Director of Education for Media Smarts. We also have Aaron Whitfield with us. He is a grade 7 student in Regina. We have Ala Al-Ibrahim with us. She is a grade 12 student in Regina, and we also have Sarah Maria Dobis with us. She is a grade 7 to 12 teacher and a vice principal at a Regina school, and we'd love to hear from you as well. Give us a call on our open line. It's 1-800-716-2221, or you can send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. We would love to hear your thoughts. Now, Ala, I want to go back to you. You mentioned you've had a phone for a few years now. I'm wondering what lessons you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I guess there were some bad parts and good parts to it, obviously, throughout 6 years, because at the beginning it was kind of mostly just, there wasn't really TikTok at the beginning when I had a phone, but there was definitely like Snapchat and Instagram, and like I'd be able to like communicate and stuff. So I believe it was more positively impacting me like once I first got my phone. But then like now it's kind of like TikTok exists, and especially through COVID, it had like a strong impact on me because I kind of like strayed away from like other stuff like going out and stuff, and was more on my phone. But kind of after that cleared off, I noticed I like just went to kind of books to distract me from any kind of electronics, and so I feel like now it's not impacting me as much as it did beforehand, and definitely through the pandemic.
Tell me more about the pandemic. I'm wondering, did you notice your own use of social media and your phone increase, and is that something that your social circle experienced as well?
Oh yeah, I feel like it definitely skyrocketed because you weren't at school every day anymore, and you didn't have the teachers taking away your phone anymore. Like it was all with you, and all your classes were online, so you can just be chatting away at the side while you're in class because it was all through Zoom. And my friends too, for sure. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm bored, can't go out, so it's like, oh, I have something to just easily scroll through. So yeah, it definitely skyrocketed my screen time on stuff like TikTok.
Yeah. Aaron, we were talking about education with Matthew just a few minutes ago. Do you find that in school you're being educated about the dangers and the misuse of social media? Is that something you think that you could use more information about?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think we've had a single conversation about phones or technology in class time ever since the start of school, and that was just a permission slip to use your phone. We have different rules than it sounds like Sarah's school because she takes away our phones, but we are allowed to have our phones at our desks. It's just that if we are caught with them, he takes it away. So I feel like we use them responsibly most of the time. I do see some students misbehaving, but they don't get caught. And like Sarah said, it's also hard to monitor 28 kids with all phones at their desks for the most part. And so, but there is a upside to it. Like we get to use them for education purposes. Like I don't want to be scrolling through my Bechamel or dictionary, my everything to find every words. It's just right there.
The old-fashioned way.
Yeah, it's good to know how to do it, and I do know how to do it. But just it's kind of just hard work after I got like a big project that I have to get finished. I'm not going to spend 15 minutes looking for a verb conjugation.
Yeah. Sarah Maria, I want to bring you back into the conversation because earlier on, I think Ala said that her friends aren't really talking about it. Aaron says maybe some more education would be necessary. How do you feel when you hear that? It sounds like you're really making a push to control this, to educate, but is it enough? It's more needed?
For sure. Like even despite what we do, I don't think we do enough. You're pressed for time at school. I have the luck with the subjects that I teach that I sort of am responsible for having these sort of conversations. But if your school's wellness teacher doesn't put the priority on that, then those conversations won't necessarily happen. Or like if another teacher doesn't make the decision to take time, then you won't have that conversation happening. And I think it's the conversations that are even more important than like having a guest come in and talk or having like a presentation, because like it means something. A presentation means something to kids, to teenagers, but they don't necessarily connect with it unless they're part of the conversation.
What more do you think what more could be done? What more do you want to see done?
More conversation. Lots of, I think, parents having more conversations with their kids. A lot of parents are, questioning themselves. I mean, I don't want to. My 7-year-old is behind us in the studio on my phone since the start because I didn't know what to do with her for an hour. So I'm not perfect. But lots of parents are coming to us and being like, I don't know what to do with my child. They're like bullying online or getting bullied online. They're on their phone until 3 a.m. And like, we're kind of like, well, take the phone away.
Right.
But even beyond that, like have the conversation with your kid, talk to your kid.
Why is that so hard to do, though, as a parent and a teacher? Why do you think it is so hard to say no?
Um, because you're busy, because it's hard, because when your kid or your students push back, like, you want to be the good guy. You don't want to be the bad guy always saying no. Like a teacher that will let their class have their phones, like the students will be like, yeah, that teacher's cool. They're giving us more freedom. They respect us. But then that teacher's like having to deal with it later, having conflict with the kids, it's a more difficult situation. And the kids aren't necessarily getting everything they could, not only out of like the subject, but like interactions amongst them, conversations in class, or like even like the fun little 2 minutes where you are not talking about the subject. If you have your phone, if you have a distraction, then you won't experience that necessarily.
Yeah. I'm Candice Lipsky. You are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Today we're talking about how social media impacts the young people in our lives, and there's still a few minutes left to get your questions or your concerns in. You can give us a shout on our open line. It's 1-800-716-2221, or you can send us an email at bluesky@cbc.ca. I feel like we're talking about solutions, which I think is really important. Ala, what advice do you have for younger people who might be getting a phone for the first time?
Oh, I feel like I tell them just get another hobby. Get another hobby that doesn't include electronics. Like how I said I do reading. Aaron said he does soccer, and it's like those kind of hobbies like stray you away from your phone. It's a fun thing to do, and I'd just be like, yeah, get another hobby, you know.
Aaron, what about you? Aside from hobbies and giving your phone to your parents, which you said didn't really work the best, what would you give? What advice would you give to someone who's getting a phone for the first time?
I would say find your balance. Like this is like the start of you, and that's how you shape it. Like that's that, and how you start will really define the rest of when you use it. So if you start moderating it at like the first few months, you'll get used to it. You'll be like, oh. And if you don't moderate it, you'll be used to having like 7 hours a day. But if you do, it'll be like 2 hours, and that's like okay, that's perfect. And just focus. If you do get a phone, you should just worry about the future of a phone and just think about what I'm doing right, and is this something that I should be doing? Is this something that I should not be doing? And what kind of consequences will this have? It's just all about moderation, because if you do have the willpower to start and just keep with it, you'll be fine in the future because you're not used to having extended amounts of time on your phone.
Do you want the adults in your life to be having more conversations about this, all of this?
Well, teachers, yes, but not my parents. My parents will figure out too much about my screen time, and I don't think they'll explain it. They'll explain it, like they'll get the message through all right, but not in a way that'll make me more like open to it. They'll get me like, oh, what is this, man? This is stupid. I'm not going to be doing this. But like if the teachers do it, they're not in my personal life. They don't know how much I'm on my phone after school. So, but yeah.
Matthew, you have teenage kids. I'm wondering, knowing all that you do, what do you do in your own home when it comes to phones?
Well, they don't actually have phones, and that is partly because they haven't asked for them. So the one time, quite recently, they went to a concert together, and I gave them my phone so that they could phone my wife or text her, as the case was, when they were done. It was time to pick them up. They each do have a tablet, and they spend a lot of time reading on the tablet, and they definitely play video games. And one of them uses Discord to keep in touch with his friends. They tell them whether he's meeting them to walk to school and things like that. But what is really important is whether they're phones or tablets or any other kind of digital technology, we've got quite well-established routines. We have times and places where devices aren't used. So those tablets and none of those devices ever go in the bedrooms. We don't use them at the dinner table. And the other thing that we make sure to do is that when we say instead of just saying get off the devices, we plan activities. so that there are going to be times when we're all out together doing things that don't involve screens. And we try to make sure that we do that every weekend day and obviously every day that they're not in school.
We don't have much time left, but I want to give you the last word, Matthew. If you could give parents who are, thinking about their own kids and how to limit their social media or how to control it, generally speaking, what advice would you give to parents?
Well, it is to set routines. It's to set household rules, but rules don't have to be about punishment. They're about the routines that you follow, and they're about the values that you want kids to live by. So in this case, I think the values we want our kids to live by first is we want our kids to be looking after their health, their physical and their mental health. That means they're getting enough sleep. That means they're not stressed all the time. That means they're able to concentrate. And of course, we also, I think, want them to live by the value of prioritizing family and friends over other distractions. And so keeping devices out of bedrooms, having times and places where you're not using screens, and don't be afraid to be the bad guy, because one thing kids have told us is that often when they're on their screens late at night, when they're on devices late at night, it's because they feel an obligation to be there for their friends.
Yeah. Matthew, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Matthew Johnson is the Director of Education for Media Smart. Sarah Maria Dubis teaches grades 7 to 12 and is a Vice Principal at a Regina school. Thank you so much, Sarah Maria.
Thank you.
And Ala Ibrahim is a student in Regina. Thank you, Ala.
Thank you.
And Aaron Whitfield is also a Regina student. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.